Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host and elk hunting coach, Joe Giglia. You want to hunt elk? They live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Welcome everyone to an In the Field edition of Blue Collar Elk Hunting, where we want to talk about all things elk. We are actually between hunts. It is now September 16th. We had just finished up being at a hunt in Colorado. We are now getting ready for our coached hunt. And actually we've got a lot of guys in the field right now. I have coaches that are all over the place in New Mexico. I'm getting reports constantly from them whenever I get service, and it's a really cool time. But I know a lot of you guys are, and I didn't realize this until just the other day when I got a text from one of our listeners that said, you know, just to keep himself company, he would listen to our podcast. And, you know, he listened to us as they were driving out. And I know some of you are doing that as you're driving. So I thought this is a super opportunity to really talk about some real things, some real issues, some of the things that other people are talking to me about, some of those things that are not your normal aspects that people talk about. In other words, these are kind of things that come up in the field or things that happen out there that, you know, you kind of go, wow, man, nobody ever talked about that with me. So this is you and me, and we're just going to have that conversation. We're sitting here around the campfire, enjoying, you know, this time and just having this conversation. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to reach back into some of those things that I saw other people experiencing, issues that they had. Some of the other things that as I was actually on the hunt, I thought, wow, man, we just never talk about this. And some of the things that other people have brought up to me that I'm like, you know, that is something to talk about, man. It's just a great point. So what happens this time of year when we are hunting is we're spending so much time in the field, we're out of pocket, and really love that about this time of year. But what happens is we get all kinds of DMs, we get emails, we get text photos, we get questions, and you know, I apologize that, you know, we're not able to get to those things and answer those right away. In fact, I did get, you know, a couple days here back into real world and got to throw a bunch of stuff out there, post a lot of stuff on Instagram, some of the cool success stories, which I'd love to talk about as, you know, as well during this time, because I think a lot of this is, there's going to be some cool information, there's going to be some cool motivation, there's going to be some cool things to think about, and there's going to be some things that maybe when you get there and you're on your hunt, it might help you through some of those things that you might not have heard before. So let's have that conversation, and let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about where you are and what's happening. So if you are actually going out in the field right now, it's September 16th. We basically have a moon that's going to full. I think it's getting ready. You know, it's getting real bright. Elk are talking like crazy right now. In fact, I just had a text from one of my coaches in a unit here in New Mexico, and he said, you know, I thought the rut was starting the other day when I talked to you, and he said, tonight, man, it just blew up. He said, it was one of those things where we did not know which direction to go. And he said there were just bugles and calls. And so he had some other realities that we talked about too. But, you know, he's like, well, which one do you go after? You know, you check the wind, you try to listen to those bulls and understand, you know, what's going on. Are they other bulls that are talking to each other? Is it a rut that's happening that they're involved in? Do you really even need to say anything? Or do you just find the direction, get the wind in your favor and start heading that way? That's something for everybody to think about, because I think a lot of times people get so caught up when they hear that they're like, oh, I got to get a call out there and have them come to me. Understand what's going on. When you have multiple bulls bugling, that means that there's a cow in estrus. What you have is you've got cows, you've got a herd bull, you've got bulls that are now vying and challenging to have an opportunity to breed that cow that is now in heat. So all of this is going on, and when you bugle from the outside, when you do that, you are just another part of the noise. Why is it that they are really going to stop what they're doing and they're going to come your way? They're not. So you've got to really think about that. So in that situation, what's cool about that is because there are multiple bulls, there are ways that you can absolutely get an opportunity or a shot on one of those. And if they are sounding off by themselves, there's really no reason that you have to say anything. You can actually start moving in, use the wind, find out what terrain is, take a look at your onX, look at where you think that they possibly are. And you could even, if you wanted to call yourself to them, what I would do is I'd probably be the one thing that would be the least obtrusive to them, and that would be most likely a calf call, just kind of letting them know that there's something there. And if they hear a calf, then there's a good possibility that there's going to be a cow that's going to be involved with that. You don't know that there's not another bull, but that's if you just want to announce yourself as you're going in. But you have to be careful anytime you're making sounds, because once you start making a sound and you start moving closer, you can't have tunnel vision. You got to have your heads up. You got to be listening for other things coming to you, and you've got to be prepared. In that situation, if I had a whole bunch of bulls bugling in one place and I had a single bull that was bugling off in another direction, I might actually think about going after that single bull first. Why is that? Because that bull hears all of that other stuff going on. And if he's announcing himself, he's wanting to get into the action, or he's announcing to the other cows out there that he's there. And so you really have less to deal with. I know that other group of elk, they're going to continue to sound off, man, because they are going to be pushing each other's buttons. But if I have a bull that is really interested, that I can kind of get singled out to the side, that might be the bull that I go for. Another thing that my coach had said is that today he had all kinds of elk that were responding. They would be coming in, and then he said that it would seem like at a certain point they would just shut up. They would just go silent. This happens a lot because with elk, proximity is everything. So it's kind of like me being on one side of the gym and another guy on the other side of the gym. That guy's going, yeah, we're the best. And so I'm on the other side and I'm going, boo, no, you guys are horrible. I don't worry about that too much because of proximity, man. There's a lot of space between what's happening with that conversation and the reality of what could happen with that physically. Now, you get somebody that's sitting right beside you, or somebody that starts move a little bit closer, and you know that, wow, man, if I just keep getting on with this, if I keep antagonizing this, I might just have to step up to the plate and deal with it physically. Elk are no different than that. Always remember, and I always go back to the thing that elk are visual animals first. When you have a bull that's responding through sound and he's moving into you, and let's say he gets to a certain point and all of a sudden he goes quiet, do not think that elk is gone, because I can tell you most of the time that elk is going to cover the rest of that ground, especially if he's not sure of what kind of bull he's dealing with, what kind of size of bull he's dealing with, or if he's a more immature bull, or he's a bull that really wants to check out the competition or wants to verify first before he does anything else. A lot of time these elk are going to come into you and cover that last ground silently to get a visual first, or to even try to come in and possibly scent check. But they want to visually see who or what they're dealing with. So when you have an elk that is sounding off, there's a lot of things that you can do with that, especially if you have a partner. If you're solo, then you keep doing you, man. You keep doing the things that are going to bring that elk to you, but make sure that your setup is in a situation where they have to find you either by using the terrain or using the vegetation. Don't put yourself someplace where that animal can see for 80, for 100, and 150 yards, because all that's going to happen then is they're going to come into that point, they're going to look, they don't see another elk, it's over, okay? So just remember that. Just because a bull, and especially if they're sounding off, man, as they're coming, and then they get closer, and they get closer, and then they get quiet, man, you be ready. Make sure that you're throwing those calls behind you. Be very spare with them because they are listening, and they are most likely responding by moving into you. So you only have to give them a little bit, just something for them to peg in the direction they need to go to. And then be ready for when that animal comes in. You know, it's funny, on my hunt, it was real interesting in Colorado for us. It was just a lot of younger age class bulls in the area that we were anyway. And really, of the bulls that were a legal bull for us to take in Colorado, one was a 4x5 that I had coming in, and I'll tell you how I ended up seeing him. And the other one I never got to see. The reason I didn't get to see it is because in my setup, I was set up in a way that that animal would have to actually expose himself in my effective shooting range before he'd have the opportunity to see me. So really, in that situation, if you do a setup correctly sometimes, a lot of times you don't even see that animal. And what happened with that is, here's the other reality. Here's one of those things, and it'll segue me to it, is some of the things that you have to deal out with that's a reality, and that's weather. So I'm going to talk about that even a little bit more. But we were in a situation where every afternoon we were having thunderstorms come in. Well, when you have thunderstorms coming in, I don't know what you can hope that your prevailing wind will stay where it's at. But man, you get those highs and lows of those barometer changes, the pressure changes, wind starts pulling from one way and then another. So I'm actually moving through at midday, and I'm moving close to bedding areas. I'm trying to be kind of in a transition, but more towards bedding, moving across, kind of going cross ridge, on the side of it, so that I'm probably in that 2/3 up on it, and where it's kind of protected from the wind. And as I'm moving through, all I'm doing is calf calling. I'm just calf calling. Every now and then, I would just give a small bugle. So it's calf calling, calf calling, calf calling, and then every now and then a small bugle, just so that it reached out more. And if I had a bull that was hearing that calf and thought there was a possibility of a bull with a calf or a calf and a cow, because, man, that was happening so much in Colorado. We were seeing single cows by themselves. We were seeing small bulls that were not legal to shoot, anything from spikes to 3x3s, these small rags that would be with one cow or they'd be with a calf. And they were perfectly happy with that. I know we did have some bigger bulls because I was getting responses from some of those. So all I was doing was basically I'm chumming and I'm casting during the middle of the day, and I really like the calf call because when I do that lost calf, I'm liable to pull a cow to me, and if I'm pulling a cow, I'm going to pull a bull, possibly because it happened several times that there were no bulls, or you're just going to have a bull that's going to come in there and think that there's another opportunity to have another cow. But as I'm moving through on this midday, it had been stormy. The wind had been going in all these different directions. So I dropped off on the eastern side of this one ridge. Most of the wind was coming out of the northwest. So as I dropped down, it kind of calmed it a little bit, even though it was blowing, and it was still kind of staying a little bit predominant. So I'm moving along and I'm doing these sounds and I'm doing these calls. Man, I let a small bugle out after doing a lot of calf calls, and I get an immediate bugle from a bull, and he's got to be under 200 yards from me. I gave a little calf call again, and I didn't get a response. And then I gave a small bugle. Immediately he bugles back and he's closer. So what am I doing right now? I've got a bull that's moving in on me, so I am looking for the best spot to have my setup so that I could use the terrain. And it was really, really cool because on this side where it was, you had a lot of these rolls and a lot of these dips as it came down from the ridge. So I was able to actually kind of be in the lower end of a dip where he would have to come over the top within 35, 40 yards in order to try to see me. And what I was doing was something that I really like to do is I was throwing my calls a little bit further down below, away from him, that the goal of doing that. And so if you could think about, so let's think about this. Let's say I'm looking at the bull, trying to straight on to where I'm hearing his sound. Where he was to me was almost same level. We're on a side of a ridge. We're on a ridge that is running north-south. I'm on the eastern side of it, and it has all these rolls that go, as if you were to move from the south to the north, you'd go up, down, up, down. Well, he's just a little bit further down and over top a little bit of a rise. So what I'm doing, instead of throwing my calls directly behind me, I'm now taking and I'm throwing my call off to my right and a little bit behind and down. And the reason I'm doing that is hoping to pull him so that he's actually going to drop in a little bit below me, just a little bit. I'm not looking for, it wasn't any kind of extreme angle, but by doing that, a lot of times he'll go right by me and give me a broadside shot. I'm doing just that, and man, the wind is perfect. And then all of a sudden at one point, the wind kind of shifted. It almost went in an opposite direction. And I was like, well, that's even better for me because it was kind of hitting me on my left cheek, coming from my left side, either hitting me kind of almost straight on and then sometimes crosswind, and then it turns and it comes completely from my right side. And at that point I'm like, well, that's not a problem, man. Just let him keep starting to drop. If he comes across, I'm really in good position, because the way it was blowing at my cheek on that left side, even if he dropped down below me, it would take a while for him to hit my scent line. He'd actually have to go past me, and I knew I'd have that broadside shot. So I'm throwing my calls down there, and man, as soon as I call, he responds, and he's closer. At that point, I'm shutting up because he's doing his thing. He has that sound peg that's down there. I've got him committed. He's already sounding like he's coming in. I'm just waiting for him. I'm listening for the breaks. I'm listening for everything there. And all of a sudden, I can hear him displaying, which had to have been within 60 yards. I still can't see him because of the terrain, but I can hear this raking that's going on. And let me tell you, I'm thinking, man, this is all getting ready to go down. I'm so excited at this point. Then it happens. Everything kind of goes still and dies. It's like, you've all been there. If you've done any hunting, you've got this breeze that's blowing. And as we're getting towards the afternoon, it's like everything settles, man. And all of a sudden, all I feel is this breeze hitting me in the back of the neck, just a slow breeze. I'm still not giving up at this point, because earlier I had the same thing happen, and then the wind started again, which actually blew that out of the way before it got to him. But at this point, it just kept doing it, and it just kept going down. All of a sudden, everything stops, everything goes silent, nothing happens. This is some of the things that you got to deal with, man. That's elk hunting. There's a lot of things that we can control, and there's some things that are out of our control. Now, just because it was windy during that day, did it mean that I had to stop hunting? No. Is it going to make it tougher? Well, yeah, it can. We don't always get the ideal situation. We can only deal with the hand that we're dealt. That happens a lot, especially in these mountains when you get these afternoon storms. But if I wasn't to hunt whenever we had an afternoon storm, now I'm looking at only half-day hunting. Or, just my morning, my midday, I lose that whole evening. And if you only have just a few days, we don't have a lot of time before we got to get back and do another hunt here. You're losing out on that. So it's absolutely something that you can try to deal with. And, if you know what the prevailing is, and if you read the weather report, like for example on my Onyx, I can go ahead and check the weather on that, or even on my Zoleo, I can check the weather for my area, and it'll kind of give me the wind and what it's doing at certain times. And a lot of times it's pretty good. I mean, is it moment to moment? No, it's not. But if you can just figure out what that prevailing is, even if you get a little switch in the wind, that doesn't mean that everything's blown, because even though you're feeling that right where you're at, if that critter's 80 yards, if he's 100 yards, he's 150, there's so many wind variables that happen before it actually gets to him. So it's not like everything is lost. It's more once they get tight, once that proximity happens, That's the reality. And I'll tell you this, here was another thing that I wanted to bring up about wind. I'm the type of guy that, I know a lot of people, when it comes to an afternoon, evening hunt, a lot of people like to wait in the bottoms. In other words, they wait till the elk get to them. I'm just not that guy, man. I mean, I don't mind getting on elk and following them to the bottom, but I think we really lose out on a lot of hunting time and a lot of meeting them in places in their areas where they're moving. And when they're moving, I have a better opportunity when they're moving to get a kill and when they don't know that I'm there. Or if I get them in to actually make a move and come into me, if they sound off or I hear a twig break, anything that's going to let me know that they're in the area. Or if I catch their smell and it's really strong, I know that, wow, man, especially if I'm working into that wind, that I've got some elk in this area. Well, there's this one afternoon that I know that these elk have been working this one ridge, and I'm basically moving along this ridge, and let's just say that I'm moving at like 11,000 feet. And it's basically at the top of the ridge. In other words, from that ridge to my left, it would go to some trees and then kind of drop into some meadows. To my right, and as that ridge is moving towards the north there, to my right, it really drops down with some elevation, but it does a lot of little benches in there before it drops down to, if I'm at 11, it goes down to, I don't know, probably 9. 9.5, and some of it's steep, some of it is kind of walled up, and which is cool too, because it helps you figure out where the funnels are or the pinch points are that those elk like to move through. But I'm moving across this ridge, and man, as I'm doing this, because of this afternoon storm, I mean, the trees around me are howling. I can't hear anything. It's super, super windy, and I'm like, what are you doing, Joe? Because here's the thing. I tell people, elk are like you. If you're in a situation where there's too much wind and you can't hear, then drop off where it's a little bit more protected, because that's what they're doing. Let's say that you're in the sun and you're really, really hot, then find an area that's a little bit darker and cooler where it's given shade, because that's what the elk want to do. If it's really, really cold and you're looking for some sun just to warm yourself up in the wintertime or in those rifle hunts, those elk are doing the same thing. They're getting in those places where they can soak up that sun and get their thermal regulation. They are really, really big about being able to smell, being able to see, and to have that thermal regulation. So as I'm up there, as I'm moving through this, I'm like, man, this doesn't make sense, because they're not going to be here in this. I go to my right, because I've got the wind coming from my left. I drop off into those little bit steeper areas that go out and they bench out, and I start working across that. It wasn't, on that one day, I don't know, I can't tell you how far I went when I was walking through there, and I catch some movement down in front of me, and sure enough, the elk are moving through and they're feeding as they are, and they bedded before they dropped down, because at the time of day I started, they decided that they were just going to set just for a little bit because of the wind, and they bedded down, and I had the opportunity to bed with them. I was probably, the closest cow was probably 80 yards from me with a herd that was dispersed all around, and I was hoping that once they got to stand up, I'd be able to tell if there was a bull in with them or not. And really all that happened on that was it was just young stuff again, so nothing that was really a shooter. But the whole point that I'm trying to make is this group of elk put themselves in a situation where they had some protection from the wind, and they had an opportunity to relax a little bit. Maybe they could tell that things were going to slow down and they were going to get a little bit more quiet, and then they can move from there. I really like and much rather work those ridges between possible bedding areas and where those feed areas are, what I call transition areas. That's kind of a midday thing that I like to do. And again, if I'm going to call, I really like that calf call, man. I mean, that's something that I really put out there. I just think that calf, and when you listen to the cow calls, and you get the calf, man, when you're going through doing that, it's amazing how far those sounds can go. So I like to use those sounds and hopefully get something that comes into that, hears that during the midday, and that would be a reason that a cow would get up and start moving. And if a cow gets up and starts moving and there's a bull there, that bull is going to get up and start moving. Yeah, there's some things that you have to deal with. Deal with it the same way they would, and you can put yourself in a good position. Now, I mentioned a word earlier it was proximity, and talking about elk and how they deal with proximity. I'll give you another example where, actually two examples, one from our hunt and one from a buddy of mine, Jonathan, that I talked to because they were in Idaho. Well, first on our hunt, we have a bull down inside a drainage that is just going berserk. I had come to a rock outcropping that overlooked this. And when I say overlooked, it's not like we could see in there because it was so thick, but it was basically where I could actually call right down into it from the edge of this outcropping. And I did that, and this bull just sounds off at the top of the ridge on the other side. And he's just going as he's coming down. He's just answering every time, and he's getting worked up. And it's one of those situations where I look at Manano, man, we're like, man, we need to get down there. We start looking for a spot to get off this rock outcropping, and every place we looked was about 100-foot drop, no place to get down. It took us, man, probably going on an hour to continue looking and moving. We just kept moving further down the drainage, and try to get to a position where we get down, where we finally locate one spot. I'll tell you, Manano wanted me in this one area to shimmy down a tree, and I didn't do that because we had already had one accident in camp. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But we keep looking, we're drop the tree idea, and we finally start to get down. As we're going down, we're still up on the side, and I tell Manano, I'm like, Manano, I want you to go down to the bottom, and there's a clearing down there. It's probably, I don't know, about 80 yards, and to the trees on the other side where that bull was raking and where he was screaming from. I want you to go down. I want you to cross that clearing and get in the other side. And Manano's like, no, man, if I go down there, he's going to see me and he's going to be gone. The point that I was trying to make to Manano, which I eventually made to him, was that if I stay up on the side and Manano goes down, he crosses that clearing, he goes to the other side, I have more of an opportunity for him to get a shot on that bull than if we were to both go down to the bottom. If I stayed on this side of the clearing and he crossed, that would be way more difficult to get that bull to come in for him to get a shot. Why? because of proximity. With me up on the ridge again and Manano way down there on the other side, I am not a threat. I'm just that bull up on the side that he's either going to respond to if he has other cows, that he might even demonstrate. He might even come down to the edge of that park and say, show yourself, blah, 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 But if I go down all the way to the bottom down there, again, now he's in a situation that if he does come down and we're only 80 yards apart, that's something where he's going to have to put up or shut up. That's a fight or flight type of thing. So it's that proximity that, Manano didn't understand with elk, and how that spacing sometimes is critical for them to come to a certain point. And you'll see this happen all the time. Like we talked before about them coming to a certain distance and then just shutting up, right? Because they are now coming in silent. Because that proximity, they want to make sure that they see something before they commit to it, okay? And I'll give you another example of that. Jonathan Scott, a buddy of mine who is now here hunting in New Mexico, when he got here, he said, man, we had this bull and they're hunting in Idaho. And he said this bull would come within, I think he said, I can't remember exactly, but it was like 80 yards, right? And they could see him raking a tree, they could do all that, and they just could not, they couldn't get him to commit any closer to that. Like even if he tried with cow calls and he tried throwing them back, he said it seemed like no matter what we did, he always kept that same distance. He kept that proximity. And I asked him, I said, first of all, was this a younger bull? And he showed me the video of the bull raking the tree, and he was absolutely a younger bull. So this is a bull that is basically, because he's doing cow call and he was doing some bugling as well. This is a bull that was like non-committal, man. So he just didn't want to come in. So what I told him is it's that proximity. I said, as much as you and Brenton know each other, what I would have done at that point is I would have started walking away. If he's always staying that distance, if he's keeping that same approximate distance to you, I'm going to walk away and I'm going to retreat, and I'm going to sound like that bull with those cows are just moving on, going directly away from his buddy Brenton. And by doing that, by continuing, I'm like, yes, you're going to lose Brenton. In other words, you're not going to be able to see him. You're going to have to leave it up to him to make something happen if that bull starts to move. He's got to be the killer at that point. But for you, if you really want to pull that bull, and he's been doing that, just keep going away. Start retreating. Go away from him. Make it 150, make it 200 yards, and then let that bull kind of get in your jet stream and come right into Brenton. And I was like, you're sounding off, so Brenton knows where you are. If something happens that he doesn't get the shot or it blows up, then he can find you and come to you, and he can start calling and you guys can get back together. Or he can give you cow calls so that you can come to him if he wants to move forward. You can figure out what those signals are. But again, it was proximity. And I think that's really, really important for a lot of people to realize. Just because an elk shuts up, because this bull they saw, he wasn't bugling, he was raking. He had bugled as he came into them, but at a certain point, he just stayed there and raked a tree. He was like letting them know that he was there, and he's demonstrating, basically hoping that some cows would think that he's worth coming over to. Okay? That's something about proximity. I think something else that I wanted to talk to you about was something that I noticed with some of the groups and people that we were around. I think a lot of hunters, they put themselves behind the 8 ball when it comes to selecting their morning and afternoon strategy. In other words, like I said, there's some people that will just wait in the bottoms in the evening, or they will start moving up the ridges and they end up at the top when the other elk are actually coming down. For me, I really, like I said, I would rather be in the trees. I'd rather be in those places where they're moving way before they get down to those parks or get down to those edges or get down to those small openings. I want to be in the places that they're most comfortable, where they're feeding when they get out of their bed, where they have movement going on between themselves, so it's easier for me to get away with movement when I'm in there as well with them. I think a lot of people do things in reverse. That's like a lot of people in the morning will be calling from up high, and then they get a bugle down in the bottom, and so they just start bailing off, and they don't consider the time. Now if it's gray light and those animals have been, and they're bugling down there, yeah, then there's an opportunity possibly for you to get in a situation. But man, if it's already daylight and you're hearing them sounding off quite a bit, if they are sounding off a lot, that's because they've hit the trees and they don't see each other as much. So that bull is going to sound more. And then you might even hear those cows, you might even hear those calves, you can hear all of that herd talk that's happening. I think a lot of people will start out high, and what they do, even if they don't hear anything in the bottom, they start hunting to the bottom instead of hunting across in that 2/3 area where elk are actually coming to. All right, instead of going down and ending up in a park down there and passing everything that was moving. Now, here's another reality that a lot of time people don't talk about. Here in New Mexico, I heard a question the other day where somebody said, well, where is the up in a place that's really just kind of rolling hills, or it's a mesa top and there's really not like those mountain northeast sides like you talk about, in some of these mountainous states? And they are absolutely right. In those situations like that, there is still areas that have thicker brush that are going to give thermal regulation, that's going to be cooler, and it's going to give them an opportunity to see or have an advantage. And a lot of those rolling hill places like that, there's going to be areas where it's going to gather more moisture no matter what. Even though it's not a steep northern side, there's going to be sides that just don't get as much sun, that's going to be thicker. And those are going to be the areas that they're going to want to go to. In fact, we have an area that we hunt that's more of a mesa top, and on that mesa top, it actually has these small drainages that go down, that form from the rain, that at places probably get, 80 feet deep in some of the places. But the way that they run, and because of the moisture, it gets a lot of thick brush on one side of those little drainages there. And I can't tell you how many times I've located elk bedded down in there. Another thing that they'll do is, instead of going up, a lot of times they will feed and drop off the sides of these mesas into some of this thick cover. And then they will come up to feed, almost just the opposite of what most people are hearing. This is just reality. This is, every situation is different. Every type of terrain is different. This is just a reality that happens. In fact, in some of these places on these mesa tops where there's some incredible transition areas where it goes from pine to like real thick scrub oak, and that scrub oak, some of it is 10, 15 feet tall, man. It provides great cover, it provides shade. A lot of times the elk will just find areas right in there and just bed down right there in those areas. They don't go and drop off. They don't go, miles to find some place where they can get on a side ridge. They find a place where they get thermal regulation, they got their feed, they got water within so far, and they're comfortable. They feel secure there. They can hear anything walking, they can hear anything coming in. It works. Don't always think that everything is just this one solid formula. Now, what you can do, it's kind of like when I coach basketball players. Instead of running plays, I get them to understand, the rules of the game. When somebody does this, you do this. When somebody zigs, you zag. Well, it's the same thing with elk. Understand they need thermal regulation. Understand that the bulls are going to be where the cows can find the best feed. The cows are going to be there. The bulls are going to follow. understand that they want to visually see things. Understand that they want to have the wind in their favor as much as they can when they bed down. If that's not the case when they have that, they're going to be someplace where they can hear things. They're going to put themselves, like, you get in that oak brush, man, you hear a lot of branches, you hear a lot of the leaves, they can hear things coming. There is no rubber stamp. There's all these variables, there's all these dynamics. But one thing that you should know within those is you should still be able to understand, okay, where's the best feed? All right. Where is a place that they can get thermal regulation? Is it hot? Where's the coolest place that they could go right now? And it be the same place that you could find. Okay. That's one thing that that I wanted to kind of talk to you about as far as, your strategy on when you're hunting these guys. Now, the reality sometimes is when you come into places, it just happens sometimes because of the way it is. You don't always have the choice of being high on a ridge and calling into a place. Sometimes you end up hearing a bull bugle and you're coming in from the bottom part of it. Well, that's just how it is, and you just deal with that, at that point. But again, always take a look at your time of day. If it's still in gray light, and you're moving towards them, or it's in the dark, where can you get so that you can be on them at legal shooting light? Get yourself in the best favor, If it's, where it's already daylight and they're starting to hit trees, well, whatever you do, try not to get in that jet stream of those animals. Try to figure where they're going. Take a look at the features that are there. Listen to where they're at, and try to get on their downwind side parallel and try to move up as hard and as fast as you can. The more you can get up the ridge from where they are, the better chance that you're going to have at creating an encounter. Okay? Let's talk about this this full moon situation right now, because a lot of you are going to be in that full moon. The full moon, to me, is a tremendous opportunity to locate animals. They're going to be way more comfortable bugling in that moon. And it's an opportunity to actually move in, get yourself in a position, be off of them, so that and then read the wind, man. If you have a wind and they're in the bottom, let's say, okay, I won't even say bottom because I say that all the time. Let's just say they're on a mesa top, right? And they're inside a whole bunch of oak brush. And they have a wind that is coming out of the northwest blowing towards them. Well, it's most likely that that's the direction that they're going to move when they start to move. They're going to try to move in a situation where they have that wind in their favor. So think about that. Kind of get in a position where you have that crosswind, where you can actually put yourself into it. Now, if they're in an area where they're staying all the time, you have multiple bulls that are making sounds and they're bugling, and then that's going to be a situation where you can actually hopefully get the wind in your favor and try to get in as tight as you can. And then you got to think about some things like, do I call? Because again, we're talking about the proximity thing. If you have a partner with you, it's like, okay, do we make sounds? Do we sneak in? Well, I'm going to give you another thing you can do. Just keep them talking. By keeping them talking, keeping their attention basically, I can let my partner slip in and try to get in a position to where they can get a shot. That's also an option. So that's something for you to think about. Now, one of the things that are out of our control, we have a bull responding, got setups going on, they're talking, it seems like everything's going good, and next thing we know, we hear a bugle from up on the ridge because somebody else has heard what's going on there, and so instead of coming down into the situation, they're actually like calling to the animals and coming in from a direction where they're absolutely going to be winded. Yeah, that's frustrating. It's frustrating on our part. Y'all, again, it's public land, and there's going to be people out there that are still trying to learn a lot of lessons. And what we've done in that situation is, and this happened to us, it actually happened twice on this hunt, happened to Gilbert and RC, that had elk working and then ended up with another hunter coming in from a side, blowing that out of there because they had the wind going right at their back. As much as you're frustrated, it doesn't help to like be a turd. So, and the guy that did it was a super, super nice dude. I mean, just a great guy and working his butt off, working harder than smarter, really. So there was conversations that they had with him, and they really started to say, okay, here's where we're going to be if you hear us talking. If you plan on hunting this side, we'll hunt over here, so that there was some kind of area agreement that happened on that. And really in the conversation, he said that he must have blown like 3 different herds up. So that was a perfect opportunity for the guys to say, why is that? And think about this. If you're seeing all these elk on this one ridge and you're seeing these multiple groups on there, what would happen if you attacked it this way instead of that way? Because you're seeing elk, you're getting into them. You're just not following basic rules, and you're ending up blowing it up for yourself and people around you. So it was a great time for education. It was a great time to meet somebody, create a new friend, and they ended up creating a better situation for all involved. So it's just something that, y'all, that's elk hunting. When I talked to somebody about our hunt and the fact that there was one time when I had that bedded herd in front of me that I had spike within 30 yards. I got him on video. Just, I don't know how long he was there. It seemed like, days. It was probably a good 40 minutes that he was in front of me, walking, feeding. I had multiple cows on the other side of him, and at that point, I wasn't even thinking about a cow at that. I was still hoping to find a shooter bull. But those things happen, especially when you're in a state that has specifications for what you can take and what you can't take. That's the way it is. It's just part of elk hunting, man. And when I talk to people and I say, this happened or that we can find every excuse in the book. But y'all, it's just elk hunting, man. That's what makes it so much fun. Now, I did tell you that we had an accident in camp. That was one thing that I wanted to talk about was our day one, man. Our day. And part of the reason we generally do a live from elk camp podcast, but we didn't do one this year because the way things happened in camp, between what happened here at the very beginning and then, some of us coming in at different times and of us having to leave at different times, it just wasn't able to happen. So that's why I wanted to do this and just kind of have a conversation with you guys and try to help you out on the hunts that you're either on now or even thinking about some of the things that you already did. But one of the things that we make sure of, especially as, we are licensed outfitters, but we do coached hunts. We don't do outfitted hunts. It's a whole different model that we do. But since we are responsible and we have clients with us, I keep several series of trauma kits that go out to the people that are coaches and stuff so that they have it with them. And I was actually showing that to some of the guys before we got out there, and I gave them our evacuation plan in case something happens in the backcountry. All these things that, again, you don't want to have failure points when you're out there, whether it's hunting elk or it's with a tragic situation that you have to deal with. You want to have a lot of that worked out prior to getting there. But I'll give you a prime situation, and then this is what happened. This is day one. Day one, I take off on a solo hunt, and I'm basically going someplace that I've never been in this area, and it just looked awesome, and I just really wanted to either check it as a place to go to or scratch it off as to where that's not where elk are. And so I drive, about an hour from camp and get out well before daylight. I'm in the dark and start heading up into a place and get up there where I can listen. And I just really start hiking way back into this one area. It's just gorgeous. Beautiful, beautiful place. Enjoying totally being out there by myself, enjoying the darkness and then the daylight as it started coming, as everything came to life. And I'm working, I'm going through areas and there's a lot of water. I have a little bit of sign, but just not what I was hoping to see in this area. So I thought, well, man, I'll hit another 2 miles in this direction away from the truck, and then I'll head back and maybe hunt back in a circle. I'll do a loop as I come back. Well, I can't tell you. I must have been, I don't know, probably 2.5, 3 miles from the truck. For those of you that don't have our history, my brother-in-law, Chav, who's been my hunting partner for 42 years, in 2019, Chav got stage 4 cancer and had tumors that metastasized all along his spine and took away his ability to walk and other things, man. And thanks to the miracles of prayer and our Lord and Chav fighting and incredible doctors, Chav fought that, came back from stage 4 cancer after being down to 90 pounds, after having been septic twice and saying goodbye to his wife. He came through those, man. But the issue was after he started to get nerves firing back in his legs and stuff, it's just been a constant training and a constant work to be able to walk. And Chav is walking today better than anybody ever imagined. But he still has some balance issues, still has problems, feeling, things on the bottom of his feet. So he had elected to hunt with a crossbow. He was going to be hunting out of a blind just like he did the last time we were there, but he was going to use a crossbow this time. And Manano brought him this nuclear crossbow, and the night before, Manano, it's one of those crossbows that everything's tight on it. And you just look at it and it's a Viper. Manano shows Chav, there's a lever right here, you just put it in, you just crank it right here, and it ratchets, it comes all the way up, it clicks, and then you can put a bolt in it. Now when you want to uncock it, you hold down this button, you push the lever forward, and then you reverse it back. Well, 15-20 seconds of instruction got meshed together, and when we were all heading to the woods, Chav decided that before he went to the blind, he actually wanted to make sure that he could do what he needed to do with the crossbow in the daylight before he tried going to a blind and doing all this in the dark and at the blind. So he decided that he was going to go ahead and stay in camp the next day. Well, I'm trying to figure out what time in the day this is. But it's morning, it's daylight, and I get a Zoleo. We carry satellite messaging devices, and I get a Zoleo message from Manano that says, Chav cut bad crossbow. Man, I'm telling you, I'm like, what the heck, man? Arm, leg, shot himself. Did he cut himself with a broadhead? All this stuff is going through my head. And y'all, I got to tell you, man, it's just, everything that Chav and I have been through, and as much as I love this guy, he's my brother. I feel responsible for him. As soon as I got that message, I was like texting back, more info, where, what, how, and I panicked, and I literally started running through the mountain to get back to my truck. And as I'm running through there was a couple of things that I did as I was running that I was like, whoa, and I just stopped myself and I said, Joe, this is stupid, man. You can't do this. You're going to hurt yourself, and there's going to be 2 people in a bad situation. And so I really had to stop and gather myself and then start moving to the vehicle as efficiently as I could without putting myself in danger. As I started to do that, I got another Zoleo message that Chav was on his way to the San Luis Valley Hospital in Alamosa. And then I'm like, where? Arm, leg, what's going on, man? And with these Zoleo messages, it takes a while for you to get them, right? And then finally I get one that said hand, exposed tendon and bone. Okay, so exposed tendon and bone sounds bad, but for me, as soon as I learned it was the hand, I was like, well, good. It's a long ways from his heart, man. In my mind, oh, man. If you'd known some of the stories already of things that me and Chav have gone through and the the crazy things that have happened to this dude, I just had no idea. I felt a lot better at that point, and I just kept getting there. Next thing I know, I'm looking up, and I'm almost to the truck, and I jump in the truck. I get to camp, and I get the full story. And what had happened was and guys, man, Chav's like 140 pounds soaking wet. He's not a big guy, and he's 72 years old, and he's not in his prime anymore. So to do some of these things for him is difficult. With the directions he got from Manano, he basically melded the two things, and he held down the release button while he cranked the bow towards to cock it, and almost had it all the way to the top when he lost control. And I think he lost control because he went with the hand that was holding the button to help the other hand turn or to keep from slipping. And it did slip, and man, I don't know, with 200 pounds of torque, that lever spun around so fast, it just caught his middle finger on his left hand and trashed it. Luckily, we had some friends in camp. They grabbed him. They got him in the truck. They put pressure on it. They wrapped it. He was bleeding like a stuck pig, and they took off for Alamosa. And getting from camp to Alamosa wasn't easy. Y'all, I mean, trauma kits and having a plan, knowing where emergency services are. I mean, luckily this was something that was a long way from his heart, and we were extremely fortunate that we had somebody in camp. Had he done this by himself up in the hills, I don't. It scares me to even think, how he might have handled that situation, or if it could have led to him doing something, could have hurt himself more. So, he has to walk with walking sticks, when he goes through uneven ground. So with a hand trash, you could create all kinds of scenarios with that in your head, man, if you wanted to. But I think one thing, what I wanted to for you guys to understand this is when you're out there, stuff can happen. Make sure that you have things with you, that you have a trauma kit that's with you. Make sure you have a plan, that when you go someplace, if something was to happen, how you would get out of there, especially if it was a traumatic thing. Make sure that you have contact numbers to emergency personnel in those areas, to the sheriff, to Flight for Life, towards state police, to any of the hospitals, to emergency personnel in any of those small towns that are in there. Try to do that so that you have a plan, right? I've been chewing on your ear now for over an hour. There's a lot of season left. I actually head out in the morning. I'm hoping to go call in some bulls tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Elk are screaming. You've been dreaming of it. So whatever you do, man, when you get out there, just understand that your greatest asset is going to be your persistence. It's going to be your mentality. It's going to be your attitude. It's going to be not giving up. And it's going to be enjoying and living for the thrill of the hunt, y'all. So, with that said, keep dreaming of the screaming. Keep achieving and believing. But most of all, y'all keep grinding. God bless. Have a great hunt.